So since I've started meditating, I have been able to levitate. I have X-ray vision and I can see into people's souls. Okay, so obviously the effects of meditation are a little bit more subtle than that, but they are no less important. Meditation has been a part of my life for well over a decade now, and I wanted to take some time today to talk about how transformative and important it has been to me. If the mind is the lens through which we see our worlds, then isn't it really important that we get everything in order there? I was first introduced to meditation through guided meditation, and for anyone that's not familiar with meditation or hasn't tried before, I would always recommend a guided meditation. YouTube is a really good resource for guided meditations. You don't need any fancy apps, you don't have to download any programs, just have a look on YouTube. There are tons of free resources out there, and if I can remember, I'll leave some in the description for you. The reason why guided meditation is so helpful is because when you first try to sit down and meditate, especially if you've never done it before, your mind is going to resist. You will find that it will be difficult to sit there in silence for even a minute. Guided meditation gives you something to focus your brain on. That is one of the first key benefits of meditation, being able to prolong your focus. I feel like nowadays attention is such a big resource and we all have so little of it. Everything is designed to grab our attention, from the apps on our phones to the adverts on our TVs to the billboards on the streets. When there is so much vying for our attention, it is really difficult to stay focused on any one thing for any length of time. If you can develop this skill in yourself to be able to give your undivided attention to something, even if it's just for 10, 15, 20 minutes, I guarantee it will be your absolute superpower, and you're going to have an edge that other people just simply cannot offer. Once I felt like I had nailed down guided meditation, I thought it was time for a bit more of a challenge, and so I moved on to something called mindfulness, and you've probably heard of this before. The idea is to take your focus and concentrate it on one specific area for as long as you can. Now, a lot of mindfulness concentrates on the breath, but I've seen some meditations that focus on a candle or a particular object that you focus on for a while. The point is that you concentrate all of your energy into focusing on this one specific thing. The longer you can do that, the better. People often ask, how do I know when I'm meditating? And it is a really good question, because this idea of meditation sums up these images of monks in robes in caves in India somewhere. The truth is that meditation is different for everybody. I like to have quite a loose definition of meditation, and I like to do that because otherwise I feel like we're putting barriers in our own way, and that barrier is stopping us from getting all of the benefits that we can get from meditation. For me, meditation is just the art of sitting down quietly for a predetermined length of time. And that's it. I don't like to overcomplicate it. I don't judge what goes on in my head, because some days I can sit there for half an hour with a completely silent mind, and that's quite rare. But most of the time I don't have half an hour to spare. I've got 5 minutes in the morning. And if I tell myself that meditation is half an hour of my brain being silent, then it's going to be rare that I find half an hour in the morning to get on with meditation. So it's much better for us to have a loose definition of what meditation is. And starting with something as simple as sitting there for 5 minutes is a really great place to start. So when I'm super rushed, I set a timer on my phone, I sit there, I close my eyes, and then I see what happens in my brain. Now, sometimes my brain is super messy and there are 101 different thoughts going through it. And if that's the case, I like to take time to just sit back and think about the thoughts that I'm having. The art of being able to sit back and observe your thoughts is really helpful, because most of the time we all just walk around on autopilot and we have all these thoughts in our head which are really not helpful. When we do this often enough, we will get to a point where we can choose whether we listen to these thoughts or not. If a thought is very helpful, we might want to hold on to it. If a thought's going to be destructive, then we can simply recognize that it is a thought in our brain and carry on regardless. you can see that having a really tightly defined definition of meditation is just going to set you up for failure, because you're going to tell yourself in the morning, if I don't have enough time, then there's no point doing it at all. And I can tell you it's better to sit there for 5 minutes and at least try than it is to not try at all. When I first decided that I really wanted to dig deeper into my meditation practice, I was at a place in my life where I guess I was at a sort of crossroads. Meditation was really helping, and I felt like my depression and my anxiety had definitely lowered. But I just felt like something was missing in my life. Like everything was going exactly as it should have been. I was happy with my career and happy with a lot of aspects of my life, but I just felt bored. I just felt unchallenged. And I realized that I was turning to modern conveniences more and more in order to kind of distract myself from this little voice that was always in the back of my head telling me that something wasn't quite right. And so I would quite often turn to video games or going out and drinking or just anything I could think of not to be sat alone thinking about things. And so I decided I was going to bite the bullet, and I booked a meditation retreat in India. The reason I booked it in India is because obviously India is synonymous with yoga and meditation, and it was a country that I already wanted to visit anyway, so the two worked out perfect. When I first told all my friends and family that I was going on a meditation retreat, the first reaction I got was, "Oh, that must be lovely." And it wasn't. It was actually one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. During that 10 days, everybody at the retreat took a vow of silence. You gave up your phone. You weren't allowed to read or listen to music. You weren't allowed to exercise. There were no pillows or bedding to speak of, so you slept at night on a wooden plank. A bell would go off at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that is where the meditations would start for the day. And you would do this on and off throughout the day till about 10 o'clock, where you would have a final meditation session. You would go to sleep. You would wake up at 4 o'clock and do it all again. The dropout rate was around about 50%. So half of us that actually started the course didn't make it to the end. And I felt close to breaking myself, because for the first time I had to actually just sit there and listen to the thoughts that were going through my mind. And that really isn't an easy thing to do. There was this constant flinch I had to check the phone in my pocket, which of course wasn't there. And then a feeling of panic when I realised that there really wasn't anything to distract me from these voices that were going through my mind. It was really hard, and on about the 5th day, I seriously questioned whether I had made a mistake or not. But I decided to push through it, and on the 6th day, I felt this absolute clarity. I remember walking out of the meditation hall for the first time ever with a completely clear mind. I was just in that moment. I could feel the heat on my skin. I could feel the air against my skin. I could hear all of the sounds that were going on around me. And it was as if my brain was trying to give me these messages the whole time, and I didn't want to hear them. And so I was blocking them out. And of course, the longer I spent blocking them, the louder they became. That eventually led to things like depression and anxiety and this low-level feeling that something just wasn't right. And when I started to sit down and really listen to what my brain was trying to tell me, once it felt like it had been heard, it just went quiet. And it was the craziest feeling. My timing at that meditation retreat wasn't ideal, because I had travelled to India in February 2020, which was a month before the whole world went into a full lockdown. So I'd actually only managed to get 9 days out of the retreat rather than the 10. But I'll always remember that moment, stepping outside of the meditation hall and just feeling this absolute clarity for the first time in my life. And it was difficult going back home. Things were great for a while. I kept up my meditation practice, but eventually those day-to-day responsibilities just came back into my life, and I found myself more and more distracted. And then I realised that for the longest time I hadn't meditated at all. And the depression and the anxiety and the constant feeling of restlessness started to creep back in. So now I'm on a streak of meditation. I've just completed 50 days, and I'm making this video because sometimes I forget just how powerful of a tool it is. And it's a tool that's completely free. It's accessible to everybody. And there are thousands of studies out there showing the benefits of meditation on our brain. If you're looking for somewhere to start on this self-improvement journey, why wouldn't you start with meditation? It's the easiest and most accessible place to start. For me, meditation is not one of these things that gives me these superpowers. I don't feel incredible after a meditation session. But the biggest thing for me with meditation is that I notice when I don't do it. When I don't meditate, I can feel my mind getting busier, and there are more and more thoughts that race around in my head. And when those thoughts race around, I get angry. I get this level of frustration. And sometimes that leads to a sense of depression and anxiety because I don't know what the problem is and I don't know how to fix it. So I get frustrated. And then because I can't do anything to fix the problem, because I'm not listening to what my brain is trying to tell me, I then go back into myself and I experience anxiety and depression. So I guess the biggest thing that I get from meditation, the biggest advantage I get from meditation is a sense of clarity. I get a sense of calm, and it lasts the entire day. The difference between a day where I have meditated in the morning and a day where I haven't are night and day. They are two completely different days. I do a lot of driving for work, for instance, and UK roads are pretty chaotic, and I guess I'm guilty of getting a bit of road rage. On days where I meditate, it's so easy for me to step back and realize that I'm not angry because of the traffic, I'm angry because of something else. And I can choose to be angry or not. And most of the time I just drop back, calm down, and carry on with my day. Another type of meditation I like to do is self-talk. And you won't hear this talked about a lot in terms of the types of meditations that are available, but for me I find this super helpful, especially on those days when I sit down and I can't get my mind to be quiet. What I often find on those days is that I'm anxious about something, and so I sit down, I close my eyes, and I talk to myself as if I'm talking to a child. Now, I know this is going to sound mental, but believe me, it works. When I sit down and recognize how my body is feeling, where I'm feeling that anxiety or that anxiousness or the restlessness or whatever the emotion is, when I sit down and I recognize that, and then I listen to the messages that come up for me, I listen to what my brain has to say about that, and I respond to it. And I respond to it in a loving and caring and supportive way. This is particularly helpful if you've got any kind of big audition coming up or an interview or just any situation that's going to make you feel anxious. You can sit down and you can recognize that situation is going to make you feel anxious, but that's a good thing. On the other end of that anxiety is your growth. That's just an example. Those are the sorts of things I tell myself. But just sit down, listen to what your body and your brain is trying to tell you, recognize that, and speak as if you're speaking to a younger version of yourself, a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old version of yourself, someone that just needs love and support. This practice, beyond any of the other practices that I've used, has been absolutely invaluable, because I think I have a tendency to be super hard on myself and always pushing myself. And sometimes I just don't want to be pushed. So sitting down with my mind in quiet and solitude, explaining to it the reasons why we are pushing, is super helpful sometimes. If you're interested in anything I've mentioned today, whether that's the guided meditations, the apps, the meditation retreat, I'm going to try and leave links to all of these things in the description below, and you can check those out if you are interested. I really hope this video has been helpful for you, and like I said at the beginning of this video, meditation is the easiest place to start when it comes to self-improvement. It's free, it's accessible to everybody, and there are so many different types. You can find one that works for you. If you're new to meditation, or whether you've been doing it for a while now, I would love to hear about your experiences, so please comment below and let me know about your experiences with meditation. Thanks very much.